Apartment dwellers, county fairgrounds under floodlights, diesel hung in the air, bleachers packed until the sound pressed against the night sky, packed clay cut by tire grooves, above banners pulled tight on their lines. At the gate, Dan Dawkins let the bike idle and watched the ramp stand at the end of the run. He rolled the throttle. As the front wheel crossed the chalk, a bird's cry skimmed the crowd. Dan's takeoff held, wind in his face. The engine screamed, his pulse keeping pace, the bird's cry riding the top. At the height of the jump, mid-air, the bike tipped too far and the horizon slid. The crowd tightened into one sound. The bird's cry lifted and didn't reach him. The bars wrenched, the dirt rushed up, everything dropped out. After, the world came back in pieces. A flat gray of sky. He was limping down a hill toward a small house, a bag on his shoulder, each step pinching his ribs. For years, the sound around Dan had been cheers at outdoor arenas. He had expected solitude here. Instead, the upstairs window held a man, leaning out, forearm on the windowsill, a gravity Dan could feel. The man's eyes met Dan's and held. "Dawkins," the man said, as if greeting someone he already knew. Dan was surprised anyone knew him here. That relief vanished as the welcome left the man's face. "Looks like you are falling apart in front of me." The words sat in Dan's chest long enough to make him question how he had ended up here to recover. The upstairs neighbor shifted tone. "This place carries sound." The last guest slammed the door and shook the whole house. "Do me a favor, close it gently." Dan nodded, went inside and carefully pulled the door shut. "Door!" The voice exploded from above. Plaster shivered. Footsteps crossed the ceiling. Dan stepped back outside and looked up. The man hadn't moved, his face almost peaceful. Dan, confused, nodded again and went in. He paced, took out a small tape recorder and spoke into it. "I'm not sure about this new place," he said. Through the floor the answer came fast and hot, as if thrown straight down, followed by 3 heavy blows to the boards above, a broom handle driving the point in. "Oh, he is not sure. He is not sure. He better get sure." Dan studied the ceiling. The words came in pieces, wavering like heat, and it was difficult to tell where replies ended and ringing began. He struggled to take a walk, cutting through unfamiliar side streets as he came upon a small gas station. The mechanic stepped out, wiping his hands. He looked at Dan and a grin rose on his face, like one of his fans. "Dan Dawkins," he said. The sound of his own name eased him. "You used to be my favorite. We would call you Dan the Man," he added. The smile held for a beat, then the eyes went cold. "You let it go on much longer, and you won't come back." Dan felt the remark as a judgment, then hobbled away. A block later, a park appeared, green and open. Under the branches, a woman with a sketchpad sat near the path, and the calm there steadied his step as he angled toward her. From behind him on the street came a truck's loud horn, a downshift, and screeching brakes. A shout from the truck broke the moment of peace. "Hey-o, there he is." A moving truck swung the corner and idled at the curb. The upstairs neighbor leaned out the window. As Dan stepped toward the truck, the noises from inside the back of the moving truck grew. Heavy thumps, chain clatter, rough boots punching sheet metal, hoots and raw laughter like two wild animals wrestling. The neighbor stayed in the seat with a calm, mischievous look as he watched Dan try to make sense of the noise. Then he paused, reached one arm back without looking, and loudly smacked the back panel twice with his palm. "What did I say back there?" The noise cut clean. A lid of silence dropped. "We were looking for you at the house," he said. Dan, confused, turned back to the woman in the park. She was walking slowly away. When he turned back to the street, the truck was peeling away. Dan returned home. The afternoon light went flat. Cold settled in the trees. He stood in the grass behind the house, beginning to find some peace in the yard. From a few blocks away, he heard tires howl. The moving truck came halfway down the hill, pulled into a turnaround, shifted into reverse, and backed down fast toward Dan, stopping 20 feet away. The rear door rattled up and two big men spilled out and ran straight for him. Their voices a low rumble. The neighbor stepped from the cab and watched them with a knowing look, raised both hands and let out two crisp claps. They halted, looked, and jogged into the upstairs apartment. A strange quiet held between Dan and the neighbor. At the lane's end, an older woman appeared with a small cloth bundle in her hands. Look who's here," she said, as if recognizing Dan. "Anybody hungry down there?" Dan turned to the upstairs neighbor. The neighbor looked at him almost amused, without giving any guidance. When Dan looked back toward her, she was gone. The lane empty. The trees had taken her in without a sound. Days thickened. Each time he crossed the yard, the upstairs window held a figure, sometimes a shape and sometimes a steady face. Lines dropped at odd angles, broke apart, turned to ringing. He went back to the park in hope of some peace. The woman was there again. He walked straight to her. She lifted the pad with a smile, a small bird drawn clean. Her eyes met his, asking for a yes that felt close enough to touch. She tipped her chin up, pointed, then tapped her ear to show him the bird chirping in the branches. He leaned to hear her. For a breath, the moment opened. Then the distance widened and her voice would not cross to him. The hope he had been holding fell through, and the need to escape overwhelmed him. In a moment of complete loss, he marched back to the house. The once friendly woods framed the house like a gateway to a burning end. He stepped through the front door, through the hallway, through the kitchen, as if music were shaking the house inside of him. The air inside felt crowded with voices he could not place, and the walls seemed to press him toward the back deck, where the rail waited like the clean run at the end of a ramp. He climbed to the top railing of the deck and, for a breath, faced the city. The rivers below did not flow. Then he turned back toward the house that breathed and pulsed in chaos. As his eyes climbed the siding, the upstairs neighbor stood behind the window, pounding the glass with both hands. The torment in his face was a desperate, focused urgency. The pounding was a frantic, rhythmic beat demanding attention. The chaos was a message being screamed at a volume he could no longer ignore. The voice cut through, layered with a shrieking bird cry he could not distinguish. "You are still falling." The words ran up his spine until all he heard was the bird's cry. His gaze climbed above the window to the peak of the house. The bird was there. Its cry and the rest, the pounding, the house, the voices, transformed back to the jump. The rail under his boots became the bike under him. The hillside turned into the figure of a crowd under bright lights. The yelling of the neighbor resolved into the shriek of the bird. He was mid-air, still in the fall, the catastrophic lean pulling him down. Regaining his sense of balance, he pulled against the lean of the bike. The bars came across. The frame of the bike lined up with the form of his body. The rear wheel bit the earth crooked. Plastic tore. Metal screamed. He tumbled, struck, slid, and the floodlights above stayed sharp and bright. Quiet separated into parts. Breath, cold skin, dirt between teeth, the hum of the lights, the crowd breaking into a roar that climbed and held. He lay on his side, breathing. The bike a few yards off, the ground pressed up against him. He sat in the dirt as the sound rolled over him, every breath full of life, risk and balance, our senses and fears, the living river flowing once again.